Friday night. This is season 3, episode 3 of Something Spooky. Tonight we're going to party like it's 1999. Because for this movie it is. We're talking Candyman 3, Day of the Dead. We're actually only a couple of years removed from the Jordan Peele-produced reboot sequel of Candyman. However, many people don't realize that there were already 2 sequels. Candyman 2, Farewell to the Flesh, and Candyman 3, Day of the Dead, the movie we're talking about tonight. Both of the sequels got their share of hate, but it was Candyman 3, Day of the Dead, that nearly sank the ship. And so, we ask, what went wrong here? We're setting out to answer those questions, but let me just tell you, finding information on this movie was like pulling teeth. I do like to do research here so that, I have the answers for you guys. But for this, you could hardly find a thing. It was a direct-to-video sequel. Therefore, they really didn't compile a lot of information about it, and it's one of the first films so far that we have here on Something Spooky that hasn't listed a box office because there was none. What we do know is that this film centers around Caroline McKeever. She's a direct descendant of Daniel Robitaille, the Candyman himself. She actually owns all of the original Daniel Robitaille paintings, and she has a connection with this sleazy art exhibitor who ends up talking her into showing them, saying, I totally won't tell anybody and market it like it's the Candyman paintings. But that's exactly what he ends up doing. He's so sick that he even ends up hiring a guy to come in and pretend to be the Candyman for a minute to scare and shock the audience as they stand viewing the paintings. The first film centered around Chicago and the Cabrini Greens projects. The second film centered around New Orleans. And this third film centers around Los Angeles. In typical film fashion, it really paints Los Angeles as a nasty city that really is undesirable to go to. It even comes complete with racist cops. I'm telling you the truth. They're freaking racist. I mean, they go to arrest a guy who's Hispanic just because he's Hispanic, and they even admit that they watch what he's doing because he's a Hispanic guy. The racist cops even go so far as to just blatantly drink while they're on duty. I mean, they just show you they're so much of a piece of crap the whole movie long that you really can't just end up liking them or the city in any way. But it was the 90s, and they went balls to the wall, even in Los Angeles. And, I mean, admittedly, if we're going to be real, along with the racist cops, we would have to have child touching. They didn't go that far in this one. I'm just saying if you want LA to look real. The Candyman goes about killing all of Caroline's friends. Why? Because at the aforementioned art exhibit, she's actually goaded into approaching a mirror and calling out the Candyman. Really, her just being around makes the police think that she happens to be involved. Also, she seems to be the only one who, although everybody knows kind of about the Candyman, she seems to be the only one that walks around talking about it all the time. So she makes herself look guilty. The guy who played Rod Lane in 1984's Nightmare on Elm Street plays in this movie also. And in 1984, he played a character in which his girlfriend is killed, things are happening, and he is suspected to be a psychopathic murderer. In 1999, in Candyman 3, Day of the Dead, he's also presumed to be a lunatic when people die, and he's a big suspect in it. The guy has range, is what I'm saying. He can play anything. He's a national treasure. And the Candyman lore is built even more, as we find out that Caroline's mother is actually the survivor / target of the Candyman from part 2. And the Candyman killed her, making everybody think that it was suicide. But Caroline starts to remember. It also bears mentioning that though the film was made in 1999, it was based in 2020. So, You heard it here on Something Spooky first. In 2020, they got the Candyman. We got COVID. And I'm telling you, I'd rather deal with the Candyman. Don't look in a mirror and say stuff. As opposed to somebody looks at you, got it. We never needed a quarantine and 3 failed vaccinations for some Candyman. Tony Todd reprises his role as the Candyman, and he absolutely nails it yet again. What I love about these movies is that he plays such a haunting, disturbing, scary kind of phantasm character. You really wonder, can he be stopped? And if so, how? In this movie, even when we don't see the Candyman, we feel the Candyman in the scene. He's there. His presence is always around. And that's what makes things all the scarier. It's got a great deal of blood and guts. It expands the story of the Candyman and Daniel Robitaille, as well as his lineage. It's really a logical third film. Tony Todd would actually come out himself and say he didn't care for this sequel. He felt it was devoid of a solid something that had made the first 2 films work. He also felt that it was just the system cashing in to make another sequel for a sequel's sake. Critics would quickly respond negatively, which shows just how fickle they are. They tore the movie apart, and yet in the reboot sequel that just came out that was Jordan Peele produced, a lot of the elements of Part 3, including full story parts, were actually just ripped off from Part 3 and put in that movie. So what we had was a case of critics ripping it apart, not because necessarily it was bad, but because they needed something to justify their shit-stained existence and the fact that people paid them. Candyman 3 definitely was not as good as the first, but neither was the second one. So now, it's time to ask the million-dollar question. Was it really that bad? The answer? Not really. The thing is, this movie could have been so much worse. We saw what happened with the Jordan Peele produced reboot sequel. It borrowed and stole a lot of elements from Part 3, only it took it into a incohesive, just non-committing to any story point sort of mess. It could have been like that. I mean, come on. At least we didn't have a completely ripped off movie that had 3 different Candymans. We didn't have our hopes and dreams just escalated for months, years before this movie came out, only to find out we're back to Cabrini Green. That's good. The Candyman's back, but it's not really the Candyman. And we've already kind of seen this movie. I hate to say it, but compared to a movie like that, this one's actually really damn good. So, folks, you know what to do. See that movie, and we'll see you next Friday. Thanks for watching.